looking for the read.
I knew you were going to mess it up one time. I don't say anything.
And I'm frantically typing, looking for this read here, Steve. And
do you want me to just do it right now?
It's all over the place. Here we go. I've got it. Right. We're live. The joys of live audio, live broadcasting. Oh, dear me. Okay. When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers with convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team. You're always close to the care that you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when this finds you. Welcome to the Sound of the Loons podcast. I'm Steve McPherson, and I am joined once again by Cal Williams, who is, as always, unprepared for life and not ready to read the read, man. I just, I was literally prepping for this, and I was like, I'm not even going to remind him. He knows what he's doing. He's a professional. We've been doing this for a long time. He'll have the read ready.
Yeah, it'll be okay. I know. I don't like scripts, Steve. I don't like scripting things. I don't like reading scripts. Let's just do things normally. You know, that old phrase, like, let's just do it live, you know? I'm not a script reader.
I'll just say, simply not good enough, Cal, from you. And, you know, as we have said often about Minnesota United and perhaps as we were saying about Minnesota United last night when they faced Sporting Kansas City, there's a lot to unpack. I think not so much about the game, which was just bad, but sort of the import of where this puts the team now and going forward and looking back at also losing to Seattle and things like that. So, but let's start with just what were your reactions watching the game? I mean, I think that it opened with some chances from Minnesota, and I thought that, you know, Kendra mentioned on the broadcast, like, they're going to really regret not taking advantage of some of these opportunities in the opening couple of minutes, because then it's true, they fell behind and could never really climb back into it. Not really climb into it at all. So what was your reaction as you were watching the game?
In the spirit of being unprofessional for a second,
oh my gosh. Was that a commentary on the game?
Oh, Steve, it was okay. Look, apologies, I'll be professional. Look, had a rip-roaring start to this podcast today, haven't we? My word.
It's going great. It's going as well as that game went.
Yeah, I've drifted into that mode that you were saying before when we've just got so many games and I just don't know what day it is and whatnot. It's, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, right. The last few days have been completely polar opposite for Minnesota United. I thought they gave a really good account of themselves against the Sounders, considering where they were, considering the bodies that they didn't have available to them. Going to Seattle is never easy. I thought they, being the away team, they possessed the ball quite well. I thought there were some really good individual performances. I thought Juan Metenier was great, considering he travelled halfway across the world to get to that game. I thought Ozzy Alonso possessed the ball really well. I thought I thought Ethan Finlay did what he could. I thought Boxall, Dibasi were good. It was an okay display. I didn't have too much of an issue with it, to be honest. But it did sort of come back to the nemesis of the fact that Minnesota just can't put the ball in the back of the net, and that was an issue in Seattle. And you know, but I thought, Steve, I thought in the second half Minnesota probably edged it as well. I thought they as I said, gave a really good account of themselves, and for me, I actually thought at that stage Minnesota looked like a playoff team. You know, there's not many teams that go to Seattle and play like this and be comfortable in certain pockets of the game and play like at some stages I thought they were playing like the home team. They moved the ball around really well, but they just didn't get the results, which meant that Wednesday's game was completely baffling to me because it was the complete polar opposite. They looked like a team that were, and they were limited. Obviously, there were there were a lot of players injured: No Reynoso, Dotson, Alonso, Gasper, Gregush, and a sprinkling of first-team players that may have made a difference from the bench, like Nico Hansen and a Juan Agudelo. But we'll get to that in a bit in terms of unavailable bodies. But just in terms of the 90 minutes as a whole in KC, it just wasn't good enough. And I thought it was littered with really poor individual performances. Romain Métanire went from top of the tree to the bottom. I thought it was one of his worst games he's had for Minnesota United. He got caught out on the second goal. And I thought DJ Taylor had a torrid time going up against Johnny Russell. It was a really, really tough battle for the back line going up against the wide players of KC. Wide players that are in riveting form and are exceptional on their day, in Russell and Shallowy, both obviously scoring on the night. I didn't think Minnesota possessed the ball anywhere near as much as I thought they were going to. I thought it was perhaps the poorest performance we've seen from Ja'Cory Hayes in the centre of midfield when he came in. I didn't think there was much from an attacking point of view at all, really. And I don't want to point the finger at Fernando Adi, because I completely understand why Adrian went with what he did. You want to go direct in a game like away to KC, because it limits the amount of time you've got to work the ball on the ground through the centre of midfield, which traditionally is quite packed with the 4-3-3 that Kansas City play. So I completely understood why he went direct with the big man up front, with Unu underneath. But we didn't really see a major example of what the partnership could be between Adi and Unu, because they didn't have the ball much at all, because there weren't too many attacking moments. The 2 or 3 attacking moments came within the first 6 or 7 minutes. And I know it's a phrase that sort of gets mocked up here at times, but goals really do change games. Because if Ethan Finlay scores inside the opening 4 minutes when he rattles the woodwork, and if Unu takes one of those 2 chances that he carved out, it is a completely different game. And Kansas City have to open up. They have to chase the game. The emphasis is on them to press because they're the home team. And Minnesota could have sat back and frustrated and caused a real problem. So, but it was just such an out-of-character performance, in my opinion. There were so many individuals that I think all of us expect so much more from. And I hope it is a little bit of a slap in the face in terms of the realization of how good you have to be where Kansas City and Seattle are towards the top end of the Western Conference. Because right now, Minnesota United, after that performance against Sporting Kansas City, are nowhere near it. Like I said, I thought they showed that they were a playoff team and a good, solid unit against the Sounders. But it was completely opposite against Sporting Kansas City. And I know it was a quick turnaround and players were unavailable and what have you. But in terms of players being unavailable, I'm sure Adrian Heath will echo this. I've not seen the quotes or anything yet, Steve, but I'd be surprised if he sort of used the lack of available players as an excuse, really, because the roster is deep enough now. And if we're going to use that excuse in terms of players not being available, Seattle Sounders have gone a decent spell without a lot of their players available. Sporting Kansas City had several key players unavailable last night, and yet they were still able to win 4-0. So, I know it's difficult on the road. That's the only thing I'll say, is that it is so difficult on the road in this league when you go to teams like a Seattle or a Kansas City. But ultimately, Steve, it was an evening that was really riddled with disappointment. It started so well. It really offered promise in the opening 5 or 10 minutes, and for it to end so abruptly, 3-0 at half time, it's very rare anybody comes back from that.
Yeah, certainly on the road, and especially, things didn't turn around immediately in the second half, Cal, and so you saw giving up, a fourth goal. It's like, well, okay, we'll pack it in. There were some, it was nice to see Josef Rosales get out there, get some minutes. It's good to see Robin Lod back on the field. He made, I think, I did check out the quotes, and he, Heath said he made an immediate impact, and it's true. You immediately saw Robin Lod and like the quality that he can bring. So hopefully he's on the way back. He doesn't, he's on the way back to full health and can start, play starting roles going forward. The depth thing is interesting. I mean, it's not, yes, SKC certainly had people out. It's nice to be missing Alan Polito and Gadi Kinda, and also still have Daniel Shalhoub and Johnny Russell. Like, I don't think that like that level, certainly demonstrated level, has been there for Minnesota in terms of who your options are for attacking players this year. Depth it's one of those things where we've talked a lot about how much better the depth is for Minnesota now, and how it's really a team where there are guys who can step up. There is a little bit, I think, maybe a certain, we've seen there's this unevenness of like what everybody can do who can step in. We saw missing a whole bunch of attacking players. Seemed like we were really short on the front four. We didn't have our best choices there. And we kept talking about how midfield, it's great. You've got all these options. You've got Alonso, you've got Trapp, you've got Dotson, you've got Gregush, you've got Hayes. Suddenly we don't have Dotson and Gregush and Alonso. And it's like, oh, well, now it's very thin. And so suddenly what looked like a good dual pivot in front of a good back line, without, again, I would agree. I love Ja'Cory as a player. It was not a very good game for him. And it just didn't, that pairing of Trapp and Ja'Cory didn't have enough teeth, essentially, to do anything to really like trouble Sporting Kansas City, it felt like. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's one of those situations where I think the question becomes, what can be done going forward? Like with this team, the way it's constituted. It's clear that, you've got guys who hopefully will get better. One of your other problems is you're not just missing Lod and Reynoso. You've got Adi, who joined the team weeks ago. You've got Franco Fragapane, who looked great for 6 games, but had played in 8 before the Seattle game. Those guys are just getting their feet back. Ethan Finlay is never going to stop working, but he's also, certainly at that point where like he's a known quantity. This is what you're going to get from him, is he's going to go fast in a straight line and try to outrun you. That's what he can do. That's not enough for what the team needs in terms of creating goals at this point. He came really close on that shot that hit the corner, which was sort of out of character for him. He's usually the one who's sort of ducking in and getting into the penalty area and serving it up and then following up his pass to with a run inside. So, it's just, what are the creative options going forward? I still think, Adrien Hunou can be a good player. I mean, I still feel like when you see him play, you're not like, this guy is not fast enough. He's not smart enough. He doesn't have the awareness. He has all of that stuff. It made me think a lot about Daniel Shalhoub actually watching him, because like, what have I told you about a young forward who had 1 goal and an assist over the last 35 games over the last 2 seasons? That's Daniel Shalhoub. He had an amazing season, and he had 2 awful seasons, and now he's an MVP candidate with 13 goals and 6 assists. It's like, I just think, it's not time to close the book on him or anything like that, but we are looking at what is going to happen for this team going forward into these final 11 games of the season. I mean, what do you think?
I think the sooner Robin Lod is fully fit and available, the better. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he started, and if it was me, Steve, I would start him up front against LA Galaxy.
Oh, you're muted somehow. Did you mute yourself? Oh, I can't hear you at all. You may have to leave and come back. I'm just watching Cal talking, and his lips are moving, but nothing's happening. I don't hear anything. Why don't you come back? I'm going to talk about you. You leave. You maybe you see what you can sort out, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I was thinking about as far as going forward this season. One of the things that's troubling as far as the team is that they have not thumped a team all year. They got whooped 4-0 to open the season against Seattle, as we all know. Since then, the margins have been very close. There's a lot of draws, a lot of 1-goal wins. There have only been 2 2-goal wins, which were against Austin and Houston. So clearly not the class of the Western Conference. Those were 2-0 games. The team has never scored more than 2 goals in a single game. And that's, even when the team didn't have full on attacking prowess, you would see games occasionally like against FC Cincinnati, where they just destroyed FC Cincinnati in 2019. Those moments where they would like have 5 goals or something like that. It's just, the question is that in there? Is that going to be a thing that can still happen for this team? the defense has been good overall, but not so good that I feel like it can be sort of their identity. You look at teams like Nashville that's sort of built around like we're not allowing goals. Nashville's obviously like sort of built that into something more this season. But to look at some of the stats, Minnesota have the 6th fewest expected goals allowed, and they have the 6th most expected goals for. Like but the difference between what that is and what their actual differential then, their expected goal differential should be 10.3. They should be up 10 goals basically, and it's actually -4. Like that gap is second only to LAFC, who have also had a legendarily disappointing season in terms of what you would expect them to get versus what they actually got. Here's my leading question for you, Cal, and this is very theoretical. Is there a point, like looking at what the rest of the season has to bring, where you say we're going to embrace the grind and we're going to play defensively, and we're going to, you alluded to this with having Adi starting up top, and the idea of going direct and things like that. Is there a point at which you say like we need to get in the playoffs, like whatever style of play it takes, and we're floating at the edge of the playoffs? Is what we have to do go into like a 5-man back line, or play a lot more 4-3-3, or just do something that isn't sort of the traditional 4-2-3-1 and look to possess a lot? Is there a point at which you have to weigh the idea of the system and how valuable that is versus you just need results? Like, and if you can't get those results, then what's the good of having a system that is the system you want? That's my question for you, Cal, if you can speak and we can hear you. I can't hear you still. Oh no. This podcast has really gone off the rails. So something is wrong with Cal and his computer, and I don't know if it's going to get better. So I'm going to do the read in the middle of the podcast. When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers with convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team. You're always close to the care you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho. Cal is taking out his headphones now.
How can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Great. I can hear myself a lot too.
I don't know. I thankfully our producer Tyson Hill has gotten me a new microphone, which isn't here yet. But I've been having some issues recently, obviously. So apologies for that. Right, in terms of what you had asked, Steve, I think that there's certainly a case to be made in terms of going a little more defensive-minded on the road, for sure. Because there's a couple of really tough road games remaining for Minnesota United, for sure. But there are several that you would expect them to win. The likes of Austin away, Vancouver away, I think is a really good possibility of 3 points as well. But I think it's. I think you have to remain loyal to what you want to do, because the players have been brought in to play that system. So you can't just automatically change it, Steve. So I think that they've got to go with what they're familiar with at home, and play when it's working, and when the players are available, play this free-flowing, lovely football that they're more than capable of playing at home, for sure. Because what I will say now, Steve, is I think you've got to win every home game now. And I don't want to put any pressure on anybody by saying that, but I legitimately believe that if you want to get into the top 4, I do believe that you've got to win every home game now if you're Minnesota United, and that starts on Saturday against LA Galaxy. There's been a couple of slip-ups over the course of the season, obviously. I still don't think the 0-4 start has really made too much difference. I really believe that there's been some slip-ups mid-season. Not beating Kansas City when they were down to 10 men, not beating San Jose twice, the loss to Austin, although I know that was in the poor start. I just think that there's been a couple of slip-ups that they're perhaps paying for now. Because if you put all of those points together, Minnesota are firmly in that top 4, So, but a lot of it comes down to, again, Steve, the simple fact of the matter is that they don't have somebody to put the ball in the net on a regular basis. And I've lost count the amount of times we've said this on this podcast, but it's now more obvious than ever that is the need again for what feels like the umpteenth season. Again, there's another problem in front of goal.
and I can honestly say this, Steve, and I say this with all due respect, but when you look at what you would consider to be the strongest starting 11 for Minnesota United, and even then if you look on what the strongest bench would be, there's not one person that I look at and I point at them and I say, that's the person who's going to score the goals today. That is a massive problem moving forward. And I still think there's goals in abundance spread across the board. I think Robin Lod is capable of getting 10 goals a year. I think Reynoso is capable of getting 6 or 7. I think Fragapane the same, 6 or 7 or 8. And Ethan Finlay can chip in as well. So I think there's goals across the board, but there's no main goal scorer. There's no clear goal scorer you can identify as someone who would get them out of trouble. And before I had the issues earlier on, Steve, you were asking about what they do next. And for me, I think against LA Galaxy, I would really start Robin Lod up front because he has been the most potent in front of goal this season. He has been the one that has worked in front of goal this season more so than anybody else. I know they still want to give Unu an opportunity. I don't think we got a real example of how good he can be in a secondary striker role, which he played obviously on Wednesday, just because Minnesota didn't have enough possession. The front two certainly hardly had a sniff at all. So I wonder if we'll see that again at some stage. I firmly believe that that's his best position and he can be really effective there. But I would go with Robin Lod up front against LA Galaxy, and then let's assume that some of the other players that haven't been available are. And you've got yourself a pretty strong lineup in a game that, in my opinion, if you are talking of the top 4 still, Minnesota United have to win on Saturday.
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear to me that the goals, like this season, I don't expect ever suddenly somebody's going to, step up who hasn't, I think Unu is who he is at this point. He might tick up his productivity, but probably for this season, this is about the player that we're getting. I'm hoping that Fragapane looks better and better. He looked great in the 6 games that we saw before the injury. Even last year, when the team was really successful down the stretch, scoring, 3 goals a game, it was this sort of attack by committee of Robin Lod, Kevin Molino, Emmanuel Reynoso, sort of all working together. You don't look at any of those guys. I look at like Daniel Shalhoub's goal from last night, where it's centered. It's a great, first of all, I mean, Johnny Russell, great job to beat the defense there and send it in. But, to confidently strike that ball through Romain Montanier's legs and past Miller. I mean, it's like, there's just not a guy like that right now on Minnesota United where you're like, if he gets it and it's in front of goal, it's going in. There's just there. And Shalhoub just looks like he's got a world of confidence and can put it in. So, this is sort of what Minnesota United is going to have to deal with, I think. And, again, this game against the Galaxy, like you're saying, it could not be more important. I feel like I'm doing Chandler from Friends there. On paper, Seattle and SKC are tougher opponents than the Galaxy, and you're playing them at home, but Minnesota have never beat the Galaxy, period. At all. 0-6-2, including the playoffs. So it's going to be really difficult, and the schedule just gets worse. The thing I looked at is of the 11 games remaining, only 4 of those are against teams who have fewer points than Minnesota United right now. And 3 of those 4 games are on the road, which we know anything can happen in any game, but obviously even more so anything can happen on the road playing those teams. They also have to face DC United, who have looked better, have, Ola Kamara, I believe, is in the pole position in the Golden Boot race now after scoring a hat trick. It's going to be tough out there, Cal, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, look, I think it's essentially now, especially for the home games, Steve, it really, really is. To my knowledge, there's 6 home games remaining, and for me, it's 6 cup finals. You have to give everything in these games because, like I said, Steve, if they really are wanting to be a top 4 team, you've got to be ruthless at home. You have to take your chances at home, and I think more than anything, Steve, I'm really disappointed. If it doesn't happen, I'll be really, really disappointed for the fans because they deserve a home playoff game. They really do, and obviously they got one in 2019, which that run ended abruptly, courtesy of, ironically, LA Galaxy. And they were sort of robbed of the opportunity of a home game in 2020 because of COVID. So I really, really want there to be a home playoff game for the fans because they make such a big difference. They really do. And I feel sorry that they may very well be robbed of that opportunity, you know? So um, we'll see, Steve. But I think, first and foremost, we have to see what the health of certain players are. Um, to my knowledge, Reynoso should be okay to go. Um, but I don't know that for sure. I've not been to training today, and I'll see what's going on tomorrow and Saturday. But he was, to my knowledge, he was left in Kansas City so he could be given a couple of more days to recuperate and be absolutely ready for this coming Saturday against the Galaxy. Robin Lodz perhaps was the only. But both him and Josef Rosales, as you mentioned earlier on, are probably the only positives that you can take from that game in Kansas City on Wednesday. Those minutes will be good for Robin to get himself back and sharp again, hopefully. But not to spin this back negatively, Steve, but the other person that I thought had a really uncharacteristic off night in Kansas City was Tyler Miller as well. He's usually as reliable as they come in this league anyway. And, the saves that he made were fine, but the goals that were conceded, I think two of them were avoidable. I think the first one, when Shallowy hits the efforts, and look, it's difficult for us to say because we're watching it on a monitor like everybody back home, but I don't know the veracity of the effort that was hit. It could have been really, really difficult and just get something on it. It doesn't matter, but maybe I'm being a bit harsher, but usually in that situation, you ask the goalkeeper to push the ball away, and he sort of made the save, and it went straight back out in front of him, and then Shelton was able to make the header, make the connection, and finish. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh there, but I just expected a little bit more from him, knowing his standards. And then I think even he will admit it was a rush of blood to the head for the third goal for the penalty. There's no need for him to come rushing out there. I don't know what he's doing. Everybody, I guess, from time to time has those moments, but I think Tyler Miller will be disappointed with his performance as well, and he won't be the only one. But it was a strange one because usually you go into a Minnesota United game not really worrying about the goalkeeper. It's not really an issue that we've been fortunate. It's never really been a major issue for Minnesota United over the last few years, anyway. But look, I mean, like I said, for me, Steve. This is now, and I must have said it 54 times against Kansas City, this really is the biggest game of the season right now. Given the way that the table looks, Minnesota are 8th. They're outside the playoffs. So if you don't get a victory against LA Galaxy, in my opinion, it will take a miracle to get a home playoff game. But that'll be 3 losses in a row for the first time this season since the 0-4 starts. And you have to start then perhaps thinking, right, there's a bit of an issue. We've hit a bit of a bad spell here at the exact wrong time. Everybody goes through it in the season once or twice. Obviously, Minnesota didn't start very well. That was quickly eradicated and they moved on swiftly. But the last thing you want is a poor run of form heading into the playoffs, because everybody knows in this league in particular as well, if you go into the playoffs with momentum, anything can happen. But I think if they lose to LA Galaxy on Saturday, you more than likely say goodbye to a home playoff game, and you've really got to start thinking, right, we've just got to get into the playoffs now.
Yeah, it's a difficult position. I feel like looking at Minnesota having fallen out of the playoffs right now, I could see landing just about anywhere. Like I don't see bottom of the table, but I see not making the playoffs. I see making, the between the 5 and 7 seed. I could see sneaking into that 4 seed still, especially if things turn around. As we've seen, it's like, I mean, hey, we were all there for the 0-4 start when it was like concerning, and then they turned around and have done really well. So maybe they still have that in them. It's really just that the margins are so slim for this team because of not having those some difference making player. Like Reynoso is the closest the team has to that. Hasn't had Reynoso the last couple of games. Robin Lod is the leading scorer. Haven't had Robin Lod the last few games. Reynoso needs somebody to feed. He's a creator and a playmaker. He can finish shots and he can finish free kicks especially, but he's not like a natural go-to scorer out there. And so it's just a team where you can't get, with regards to like Tyler Miller, you can't get it's not a team where you can get 80% from everybody and get one guy to give 150% and go out there and take it. Everybody on the team sort of needs to be firing together and be hitting that like 95 to 100%, and maybe a couple people getting over 100%, to bring it home. And that's just sort of the way the team is. Like I said, there's I can't remember if you were still in the room or not when I was talking about this, but haven't thumped anybody. There's only two games that they won by more than a goal, and those were against Austin and Houston, hardly world beaters. That there hasn't been that game like that FC Cincinnati just absolute destruction, or it's like a 3-goal, 4-goal, 5-goal game. They never scored more than 2 goals in the game this season. Like this is how it's going to be. If they're going to get results down the stretch, they're going to have to gut it out, and that's about all there is to say about it, Cal, I think.
Yeah, in terms of everything you've just said, Steve, is completely right in my opinion.
Thank you.
The main issue is there for everybody to see, is that they don't have a reliable goal scorer. And that's a shame, because several players that have been brought in this year, and one or two that have left as well, were meant to be that. I just... It is a concern, because they're doing everything else okay, Steve. From a defensive point of view, apart from Wednesday, no problem at all. You haven't really had to worry too much about the back line. It's usually quite solid with Gasper, Dibasi, Boxall and Metenier. It's usually okay. In the central midfield, that's not been too much of an issue either, because there are just simply so many options for them. But when you think of perhaps what you would consider now as the starting two, I would probably say it's Dotson and Trapp. That's a pretty solid central midfield in Major League Soccer, completely. The 3 attacking players behind whoever the centre forwards is or isn't, when they're in full flow, they're great, and on paper would cause nightmares for any MLS team. The main issue has been in front of goal this year, and I would say to people to not panic in terms of the entirety of the team, because they're still creating chances. They're still playing some lovely stuff. They're possessing the ball quite well on most occasions. They're defending well. Goalkeeper usually is reliable. They're doing fine. The issue is they're just not putting the ball in the net, and that's the biggest issue. They're still playing lovely football. They're still creating chances. They're still fairly pleasing on the eye. The problem is they just don't have anybody to finish these chances. And this is why now, for me, Steve, I would start Robin Lodz, because he has been the most clinical in front of goal this season, which I don't know what that says about the other centre forwards, but I don't want to take any credit away from Robin Lodz, because again, he's proven that he can play there. Is he ideal? Not really, but as a central striker, he does give you something that perhaps the others don't offer as well. So he's very good technically. He's very good playing off the shoulder, considering he's not a natural centre forward. I just think he's a good footballer, Steve. I just think he understands the game so well. And for me, like I said, if he is able, if he's good to go the 90, I would absolutely start him at centre forward against the Galaxy this weekend.
Yeah, well, we'll have to. I hope so. I would love to see it. Robin is one of my favorite players to watch, and again, like you said, I think the he's just a good footballer. He understands space. He understands timing. He has awareness. He can do a lot of different things. He can fill a lot of roles with hold-up play as well as being a playmaker. He's incredibly efficient is another thing that keeps coming up when you look at stats. He doesn't get a lot of touches for an attacking player, like in that as a sort of midfielder, but what he does with them is tremendous. Obviously, he's leading the team in scoring. So we'll just have to see what happens this weekend at LA Galaxy. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining us for this technical difficulties ridden edition of the 157th Sound of the Loons podcast, presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. Be sure to leave us a nice review on iTunes, or at the very least a 5-star rating, and follow the team on Twitter at MNUFC. You can follow Cal at CalWilliamsCom. You can follow me at Steve Entris. Apologies, as always, to Richard Wagner. And remember, there's only one person in this whole world like you. People can like you exactly as you are.